This is Writers Not Writing, the show where you can get to know your favorite writers and soon-to-be favorite writers by listening to them confess to the ways they procrastinate. Thanks for procrastinating with us. I'm Benjamin Gorman, and the quiet guy behind the glass there is Doug the producer. I write novels and collections of poetry and stuff. Doug tries his best to make me sound better. And each week we have a secret word to listen for. If you catch it, you earn the right to take an extra break at the time of your choosing from whatever is stressing you out. From Not a Pipe Publishing, welcome to Writers Not Writing.
Today's secret phrase is leftist propaganda.
If I take my time.
Welcome, everyone. Today's guest is Erik Scott de Bie. Erik Scott de Bie is a sci-fi fantasy horror author, game designer, and actual play streamer, best known for his Shadowbane series set in Forgotten Realms, his World of Ruin apocalyptic fantasy series, and his Justice Vengeance superhero series. Erik, thank you for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Benjamin.
So regular viewers know we always dress up in costumes like this. This is what we do, but we have to explain them for the folks who are listening on the podcast. So what did you choose to wear today?
Well, clearly I am dressed in a tailored Armani suit, all black, obviously, from which arise these little wisps of black smoke. Their source uncanny to human understanding. I could explain this ineffable darkness, but that would cause psychic damage, and I don't want to harm your viewers. So best leave these particular secrets unplumbed.
Well, and I appreciate that because I chose to wear this elven armor, and the mail underneath the plate is impossible to pierce. So I take no piercing damage, but I am very susceptible to psychic damage. So if I were to ask, and so folks in the comments section, please be gentle. I am susceptible to psychic damage. But I was going to ask about the smoke, and I'm glad I didn't. But that is
It's probably for the
it's a
best.
nice looking suit, though. That's a nice suit.
Well, I can't say exactly where I got it from because I am under extra dimensional NDA. So.
Yes. Well, and wearing this mail, please don't. Like I could not handle it. So you're 6'7".
Correct.
So I'm sure you've been getting this question all your life. Do you play basketball?
So, I worked up an excellent answer to this question, which I don't actually use on people. I just tell them the story. So the story goes like this. Hey, you're really tall. You must play basketball. To which I respond, hey, you're really short. You must play miniature golf.
Fair, very fair. I've got a couple.
I don't use that zinger on people. I just tell them the story because then we can laugh about it together.
Right. It's a little circuitous. So I've got a couple of friends who are like 6'5", and people all the time are saying to them, basketball, and they're like, that's not my thing. Like, just because I am over right around 6, they're shorter than you are, but that's the presumption.
Yeah, apparently there's a certain degree of athletic skill, coordination, passing, shooting, all of that goes into basketball. It's not just the height.
Yes, but you do have a reach advantage. So are there some other sports that...
I played tennis for a long time, and my serve would have been great if I was more coordinated at the time. I also do fencing, and I do boxing, and I'm potentially devastating at those because of the reach advantage.
I mean, I would think, yes. I will never box with you.
That's probably for the best. Well, if you ever do, you want to get inside the guard, hold your, and body shots. Yes. That's the ticket.
Yes. And have you done fencing? I took a fencing class one time. It was really, really cool to learn just the basic footwork so that I can stand and pose like I know what I'm doing. But it is quite demanding. I
have done some fencing. I call myself a novice fencer, though. I'm not particularly great. I've been in one tournament and I came in like 3rd or 4th or something.
That's not chatty.
It's not too bad, but the bane of my existence as a fencer are short left-handed fencers. Because it's always hard when you're a dominant right-hander going against a lefty, because lefties spend their entire fencing careers fencing right-handed people. Right. And right-handed fencers spend their entire careers fencing right-handed people. So lefties have a major advantage there. Plus, when they're really small and they can just get inside your guard and just poke. Yeah.
Yeah, and you're going, I've got this huge sweeping range, but it takes me longer to get this arm to where I
Right. You gotta kind of like pull your arm back in order to, yeah. My chief nemesis when I was in college doing fencing was like this 12-year-old boy who would show up to community class and just wipe the floor with me, and it was hilarious.
Well, there's probably also a measure of, that 12-year-old boy phenomena of I'm willing to, jump inside your guard because I haven't learned yet that I shouldn't do those things. Like there's been culture, this enculturation of stand back, be very strategic, prepare. And he's like, no, I'm 12. I'm just going to run right up into your face.
I have not yet learned that man is mortal.
Right. Yes, it is. My son and I were in a talent show competition one time, and there we got to the last round, and it was in this auditorium of 500 people or whatever. And the reporter asked him afterwards, were you, at all scared being up in front of 500 people? And he was totally flummoxed. He was like, no, why would I be? Like he had no sense of, oh, that should be intimidating, and then junior high and high school take care of that.
Generally speaking, yeah.
And now he would be very nervous, but at the time, no, he was totally fine. So you are a prolific writer, but show's all about procrastination. What takes you away from your writing? So lately, what pop culture-y thing has been taking you away from your writing?
Well, I'm sure this isn't going to come as a big surprise to a lot of people, but I have been playing Baldur's Gate 3 a lot. And just last night, I was up until midnight playing with some friends of mine who live in Tennessee. So that means they were up until 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And we're playing multiplayer. And there's something really funny about Baldur's Gate 3 multiplayer, particularly when some people get in very dour, serious conversations, and one person's just running around in the back, just hoovering up everything. Like I'm picking up all the mugs and all of the plates, and the character's like, we're talking with Raphael here about matters of life and death and eternal damnation. And meanwhile, you're just stealing everything from the bar. That's in the background.
There's this great clip. I'm trying to remember the guy's name. Leroy Jenkins. You're the Leroy.
Yeah.
I've got other stuff to do here.
Well, my character's a rogue assassin, so that's what I have to do. I have to charge right in and attack immediately. And you could pull off some pretty amazing things as an assassin in that game.
Just start and then Leroy Jenkins.
Once you fire off your first barrage, then you're like, uh-oh, what do I do?
Yeah, we got to get back to the tanks now as fast as I can. Tanks and healers, please.
That's right.
So is that one available on we're an Xbox household. Is that one still just on PC or is it on Xbox yet?
Okay, so it is on PC and on PlayStation 5. I think you can also play it on PlayStation 4, but I'm not sure I'd recommend that. And then it is coming to Xbox sometime in the next couple months, as far as I understand it. It's totally worth it. Very entertaining. It will make you procrastinate many hours.
Well, man, those are the kinds of things where so I'm full-time school teacher, and so what I have to do is wait and buy them like at the beginning of a break, like because I know myself, and I would go, oh, sorry, I can't come into work for the next 3 days, which is not really an option as a teacher. So yeah, I intentionally will go, this is my reward. The school year has ended, or spring break or whatever. I am getting Baldur's Gate 3 and I'm doing nothing but sitting here and eating Cheetos and, drinking caffeinated beverages for the next few days.
Obviously, the best analogy to describe what Baldur's Gate 3 is that it's like a 5e Dungeons and Dragons game, right?
Yeah.
But if you're not really a Dungeons and Dragons player, or, you haven't played 5e very much, what I describe it as is being like Dragon Age with a certain amount of Final Fantasy Tactics mentality.
So how do the mechanics actually involve like rolls?
They do, in fact. Like when you're doing skill checks, a die will appear on the screen and will tell you what the DC is. And then you hit enter, and you can add bonuses, right? This is so you can stack on those like guidance and potentially you swig a potion real fast because it's going to be a hard DC. And then you push the button and it actually rolls the die and you come up with a result, and then it will add the bonuses in it. So it's like the game kind of teaches you how 5e works on some level.
But it is live in terms of the time, right? I mean, you don't have the flexibility to go, Let me think about that. Like you
Well, you
know.
do actually. It's a turn-based game.
Oh, it is. Okay, good.
Yeah. Turns can go very quickly though. Like you can have a very clear
Yeah,
sense of I'm going to run up and attack this guy. Um, but you can take as long as you want going through spells and stuff. There
that's
is a
that's what I
certain
need.
amount. Yes, there's a certain amount of jank in that things only become turn-based when people are involved in the combat. So if there's someone else who's not yet up to where the enemies are, or the enemies haven't seen them yet, they're not involved in the combat yet. So you can switch to that character and keep creeping around while everyone's standing there like we're in fighting. Or sometimes enemies will just be patrolling around and happen across you while you're in the middle of this battle. And then
Yeah.
they will join the combat. But as soon as you like get close enough to be involved, you roll initiative and then you're in the turn-based system.
Yeah, Mass Effect 2 had this mechanic where you could, essentially pause and think and use the wheel to figure out, okay, what is going to be my next move? And boy,
Yep.
did I abuse that. I was like,
Oh
I
yeah.
need to think about this. What's the best strategy for taking on 5 people and I'm crouched here?
You've
Uh,
hit on another one of my fandoms. I'm a major Mass Effect fan. I
okay,
played all of those games. I platinumed Mass Effect 2, for instance. Okay. And I am not a first person shooter kind of player. Like that's not my style of gaming. I just love that game that much.
yeah.
And I
I
practiced and
mean, I know
practiced
this
and
is
practiced.
a highly debatable topic, but what did you think of the ending of 3?
By the time, okay, I was a slightly late comer to Mass Effect 3, Mass Effect as a whole series. By the time I started playing it, all of the games had come out.
Okay.
So when I got to Mass Effect 3 and I got to the ending, like it had already had the patched extended version, the
Yeah.
ending. And so I found that okay.
Yeah.
Like it didn't bother me.
Yeah.
If I had been there on launch day and within the first week got to the redacted shortened ending, I probably would have been annoyed. But my theory on the endings is that the change that you're making in the game isn't really to the universe itself. Like the universe is going to take a certain number of discrete paths. The change that you make is to you as a person. That, as you're playing Mass Effect, you are altering your character, you're building your character, your Shepard, and you're also changing yourself and your own perspective.
Yeah.
So that's
For,
what I got out of the game.
for folks who've never played this game series, you get to the end, and in the original ending, there's, I was about to say a bit of, but really very much a Deus Ex Machina, it was all a dream kind of twist. And your character you have to make a choice about who you are, but it invalidates some of the choices you've made in the actual universe. And as a writer, that is a pet peeve of mine when a writer says, and it was all a dream. Or I don't know if you've seen the new Flash movie, which I'm incredibly irritated by time travel stories in general. As soon as somebody goes, the solution is time travel, I'm like, no, don't
You're
do
like,
this, author.
hold
I see
on,
you're doing
that
it
way lies
perfect.
madness. Don't do
Yeah.
this.
What we're gonna get
Yeah,
out whiteboards, like this is gonna be bad, and pretty soon your reader's gonna be going, but why didn't they just go back 3 seconds earlier and solve the problem in another way? You've
right.
undermined the stakes. And so when I got to that ending, I was like, oh no, they got stuck. They couldn't think of how to end it. And so they went with this Deus Ex Machina ending, and it was, that as writers, we just are like, I have fallen into that trap before. Don't do that.
Well, when you're trying to end a role playing game, right? Especially a role playing game with an immersive story that could go so many different ways, and you can alter things in numerous ways. Like you have problems when you come to the ending.
Yeah.
You can create lots and lots of endings, lots and lots of permutations of an ending, which is what Baldur's Gate 3 does. Or you can try and kind of funnel everything down to just a couple of paths, which is what Mass Effect does.
Yeah.
And Mass Effect, from the beginning was very much a like, we're on rails, but the rails are under a thin layer of sand,
Yeah.
right? And it seems like we're making a big difference, but when you replay the game and you're like, I'm going to make different choices, and you still pretty much end up in the same way,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
is
There are
fine.
really significant choices, and you don't know that they're that significant the first time you make them. And then when you're replaying, you're like, that was the one that's going to matter later. So yeah,
That's
that
right.
is a
That's right.
limitation.
Which is why, what I have to take from it is how it affected me and my perspective rather than how it affected the universe itself.
Yeah, which really, I mean, that is my beef with the Flash. You know, the movie Flash, you get to the end of the movie and it has only been a significant story for one character. You know, this didn't matter to anyone else. And I was like, you have wasted 2 hours of my time. I didn't care enough about this character to, want to follow him on his psychological journey. Like,
yeah,
but, Mass Effect does that better. I cared more about that fictional character than I cared about Flash. So outside of those games, what is a news story that has been pulling you away from your writing lately?
Oh my gosh, Benjamin. Okay, I like to think of myself as pretty in touch with what's going on in the world, which is a blessing and a curse.
Yes.
Like there's so much terrible stuff going on in the world. The ongoing violence in Gaza, the glacial pace of our own American justice system. I keep seeing these news stories of Trump does this ridiculous thing. Trump did that ridiculous thing. Trump said this ridiculous thing that should be a violation of his agreement. And I'm like, yeah, is something going to happen? No,
not to wealthy white men. Like
Right.
and that is so frustrating to watch and go, if this were anyone who was not a very wealthy white man, this would be a very different outcome right now. And
I mean, I feel like we're just kind of like slowly expected to just forget about things. The war in Ukraine still going on months and months later.
Yeah.
Has that been going on for a year now?
I think so. And yeah, this is an invasion. Like if if our country were invaded, it would be all we would be thinking about. And we're supposed to go, oh, well, that is old news.
And for a while we were like, yeah, the Ukrainians are putting up a really good fight and they're kicking Russia's ass. Wow, this is amazing. It's going to be over soon. Yeah, that was like 6 months ago.
Yeah. And once it became really entrenched, it was boring to us.
Exactly. And we just move on to the next interesting thing. And it's unsettling is what it is.
And at the same time, I have to, step back and realize as we debate things like aid, like one of the things that I think Americans don't think enough about, and we should kind of reflect on, is if we spend, X number of billions of dollars on aid to Israel, aid to Ukraine, the money doesn't go into a bank account in Ukraine. We are purchasing weapons systems in the United States from companies in the US and sending weapons. And so there is a kind of moral, we should feel a little uncomfortable about the fact that we, say we give aid throughout the world, we give guns. Like we are a great gun manufacturing society. And I'm not super comfortable with arming all of these conflicts either,
Yeah, I tend to side on the side of peace and diplomacy and negotiation as the best solution for things. It doesn't always work, obviously, but
neither does war and violence. So why do we predispose to one thing that often does not work? I don't
have the solution to all these problems.
No.
I wish I did. I wish I could just make skill checks and it would solve everything, which is one reason why gaming is so fun.
Yes, it is. It's a little more controlled and predictable and better written. I mean, that's one of the things I keep coming back to is this universe is poorly written. It is poorly GM'd. So
this clearly needed a few more editing passes. Maybe a development edit would have been good. However, it's possible that we are in the darkest timeline.
Yes.
So
yep. However, the George Santos story has been
that is true. That is true. Sometimes positive things happen. That guy got expelled from the house. I was like, "There's no way this is going to happen," and it did. And I'm like, "Wow, amazing."
And in a way, I feel like the Dems did the Republicans a favor by participating in that. Like, it was such a great news story for everyone. It was so entertaining to have him still there. And I was like, if the Republicans can't figure out how to expel this guy, then the entertainment factor is pretty remarkable. But I suppose we should care about things, legislation more than entertainment. But he was very entertaining.
I suppose so. I want to say two things about that. One, George Santos, not a rich white guy.
Right.
So let's keep that in mind. If he were a rich white guy, Matt Gaetz, for instance,
exactly,
he'd still be there. And Matt Gaetz still is there, even though that guy is just as much of a buffoon as George Santos. He's just maybe a little less obvious about it, a little less.
Yeah. Well, I have thought about the fact that, the kind of the foils that I was going to say like liberal America, but most of America loves to pick on are Marjorie Taylor Greene and Lauren Boebert.
Yes.
The only people who end up going down for all of Trump's stuff are two women. That should tell us something. Like we
low
didn't
charisma Bard characters. Yeah.
Yeah. It's also a lesson to the pick-me's. Like, hey, pick me. You will be the first to go down. Like, these people will not go down for you.
It's like there's this concept called a quisling. That's a person who sides with the fascists, thinking that the fascists aren't going to crush them. Like, oh, I never imagined that the leopards eating faces representative would eat my face.
Yeah.
What? And I'm like, come on, people. Like, stop working, not just voting against your own interests, working against your own interests.
Yeah, and for people who will not side with you. Like, they will not, these folks will not sacrifice for you the way you are sacrificing for them. That should tell you something. But yeah, it is hard to watch and go, yes, the Quislings can be incredibly annoying and their behavior can just be repulsive. And then I also think, but they shouldn't be the only ones to go down.
Right.
Like, this is,
right.
Yeah, I've been kind of watching who are we making fun of the most, and it is, it does tend to be.
It is them. It is the living straw people that that the GOP puts in front of us,
and they choose that. Like, they should be held accountable for choosing. I am going to be the person who defends, and at the same time, like, they should not be the only ones held accountable. And so,
well, and a certain amount of that is grifting, right? A certain amount of that is like, I can convince people on the right that they're not that terrible because, hey, I'm a woman and I'm on your side, or I'm a non-white person.
See, you're not homophobic. You like
send me money.
Person. Yeah.
And they're just looking for that golden parachute.
Yeah,
which
and so
a lot of them
look at that from the outside, and we're like, it's so appalling to me that this person would be betraying their own community. Then we are kind of agreeing with the right that this community gets targeted, right? Then that.
Right. It's grotesque. That's what it is.
So
I am glad Santos is gone, though. Fuck.
Yeah. Well, and he is, he's a grifter. He wants to stay in the public eye, and so he's going to choose one of two paths. We're going to get to watch in real time as he makes this choice. Does he decide to be the far right Newsmax guy who says, all the Republicans are too liberal and he's the furthest right? Or does he decide to go, the way for me to make some money is to, be on MSNBC revealing things about my Republican colleagues and be the new darling of the left? And I don't know that, he's going to make, my guess is, a financial calculation, which one of those pays better. But he might get a lot of attention for being the person who calls out his former colleagues, and that could be very entertaining. So we'll see.
Could be. Or he might flame out and come to nothing.
Yes,
that's always possible.
Disappear. And he could also end up in jail, and it's hard to be entertaining when you're in a cell. So we'll see.
It's true.
What happens to him.
I would not mind a few people being in jail,
held accountable. It would be remarkable. Yeah, and that's the other thing is, our justice system is, throw them away, and lock them up, throw away the key for these ridiculous sentences that don't do anyone any good, and we all pay for it. But a short sentence gets people out of the limelight. Like, if they just want attention, you take a George Santos and you put him away for 3 years or whatever for all of his financial crimes, he disappears, and that would be enough to make people think twice about grifting.
Yeah, that would be nice.
We'll see. So outside of the news, we're not getting ourselves sinking into a terrible depression about things we cannot change. What is something else you're doing when you're not writing?
Well, as I mentioned, I'm a gamer. I'm, in like 6 to 10 different tabletop campaigns at any given time. Wow.
Just
some of which I'm running, not all of them. Let's see. I was running D&D yesterday. I'm supposed to run Star Wars tomorrow. I do stuff on this Twitch channel called Dungeon Scrawlers. We're a bunch of writers who get together and play D&D.
I have watched. Basically. It is fun. Yes.
And I ran a Forgotten Realms game for my group there for about 3 years. And as we were doing that, we were starting to do other shows. And right now we're mostly other shows that are not directly related to that. Although we do have a pseudo sequel that is going on and nearing the conclusion, called Fearful Symmetry, which is run by Erin M. Evans, who you should also have on the show at some point if we can make that happen. She is awesome. Where the characters mostly are facing other versions of themselves from other timelines and universes.
Interesting.
In which like different choices were made, and it's very interesting. So highly recommended. Links down below, I'm sure. So.
Oh yeah, we'll put it in the show notes. So when you're DMing, what is kind of the time balance? How much time do you invest, before a particular game session? It just seems, I've never DM'd. It seems overwhelming to me.
All right. So here's my big secret. My GMing style is almost entirely improvisational. It is almost entirely based on what the players are bringing to it and the consequences of their actions. I come up with a setting or scenario, or if I have a module, I might pull out like a area where that is. And then I ask myself, okay, what would it be like with these characters in it? Like, what decisions are they going to make? And then after a session, I say, okay, how did they influence things? What should logically happen next? So I plan session to session. I do have an overall plan, like kind of like, this is where I'd like to get with this campaign, but I don't know exactly how, and I don't know the order of things, and I don't know exactly who they're going to meet. So I just have a big cast of potential characters in my head that I pull out. I have notes. I occasionally build monsters when I want there to be a really cool fight. Yeah, some of my back in the 4th edition days, the edition that need not speak its name.
Yeah,
I ran a series of encounters. They weren't really campaigns or adventures; they were just encounters called God Slayers. And one of my friends reminded me of this the other day, where I tasked the players with creating 30th level characters, and then I would create a huge monster, or I would take one of the powerful enemies that is in the book. Like, I think they fought Orcus and Dagon at the same time, or it was Demogorgon and Dagon. I think it was Demogorgon and Dagon at the same time, along with a bunch of other demons. And then the next, I also did Orcus the first time. Jeremy Crawford was actually one of the players in that game, and he wrecked Orcus. Like he was playing a paladin. He went up, he Nova'd, and took out Orcus in like 1.5 rounds. It was amazing.
Yeah.
My third one, I learned my lesson, which is that 30th level characters in that game were extremely powerful.
Yeah.
And they were always going to be able to match whatever I threw at them that was just in the box, in the books. So I started making my own monsters. I took a Chardalon, who was a powerful red dragon, epic red dragon, and just made him super extra powerful. I called that monster Empowered Chardalon. He has like a CR of 40. And then I put him with 6 Balors, who I gave Sword Mage abilities to. And I had the fight be on a volcano top, where the volcano is erupting. Several of my players got really upset that Chardalon apparently had lava walk. They're like, lava walk is not a thing. And I'm like,
yes,
it is when I want it to be.
Yes.
And that particular encounter ran into the problem that 4th E often does, which is that the combat just took too long. Like, we gave up 6 hours in, and they had just bloodied the dragon.
Yeah.
None of them were down. I think I had taken one down mostly, but he popped back up with some epic ability that gave him the power of a full rest or something. And I was just like, all right, this is silly. This is crazy. So I built a couple more monsters, but I never actually got the chance to use them. 5th edition came out. That's what people wanted to play. And I think 5th is pretty good. So
yeah.
The other monsters, Omega Tarask, named after the Omega weapon from the Final Fantasy series.
Yeah.
And I built a stat block for the Raven Queen.
Interesting.
So actually fighting the goddess of death.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. But
perhaps one
nobody's
day.
had a chance to do that one yet.
No one's had a chance to do that one yet.
Yes, it would be interesting to see if you win, if you defeat death. I mean, put that in a campaign. What are the consequences afterwards? There's
Right.
no death. That would be interesting. Okay, we won the stage 1 of the campaign, and the rest of the campaign is how do we resurrect her? Because it turns out death is pretty important. Like,
follow-up campaigns can be really fun in that regard when you're just dealing with the consequences of what happened in the first campaign.
yeah,
Especially if it's something ridiculous like that. Oh, we broke the multiverse in this particular way. And then following up, you're like, well, there were these awful villains who broke the multiverse and you have to go and fix it.
yeah. Well, I mean, to some extent, that is what has happened in the MCU. Like, hey, we decided to bring time travel and a multiverse into it. Now, how are we going to create a Loki television series to try and undo that choice? Because it's getting a little rangy. So yeah, I mean, yeah, that Marvel phase, whatever we're in, is that, is making up for choices that were made in the next campaign.
Trying to do surgery rather than just reboot everything, which is what comic universes inevitably do.
Yes.
If we've seen anything from Marvel and DC in the past.
Well, and
I think DC has rebooted what, 6 times or something?
Yeah.
Marvel has rebooted a couple times.
Yeah, and the trick they're running into is how do we reboot and keep some of our stars? Like, we want to keep some people because these people are big draws, but I think this choice to go, I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who's not seen it, but the Loki TV show is essentially a reboot. Like, now we're in the Loki verse, and and that's supposed to solve that problem, and we'll see how well it does. But like the Marvels movie, the Marvels isn't in the Loki verse yet, so we'll see. There are a lot of very smart people, but are they communicating with one another in the writing of all these? We'll
it's certainly an interesting thing to discuss and theorize about.
Yeah.
Very nerdy. Oh my gosh.
Yes, they've got us nerds talking about it, so it's worked. Yeah,
exactly.
Well, and I never want to become like, I'm a Star Wars fan, and I'm very critical of Star Wars fans who at every phase are saying, this is the worst, this is so, and they're not able to step back and go, oh, wait, to what extent is my nostalgia playing into my, my own choices? And I found this, and my son is a huge Star Wars fan too. And so he's that, 2 generations of Star Wars later, fan. So he's going, oh, the Rebels cartoon is the thing I'm nostalgic about. And I'm going, oh, it's episode 4 is what I'm nostalgic about. And I found this article that was the explanation in a fanzine from like 1982, explaining why they were no longer going to be continuing to produce this fanzine because they were so angry at The Empire Strikes Back.
Right.
The Empire Strikes Back had ruined Star Wars, and it was like you were reading descriptions of Force Awakens, like it was the exact same criticisms. And I was
exactly,
Star Wars fans have always been the same. This new thing is always bad,
Empire Strikes Back is much beloved now.
Yeah.
But we don't remember because, some of us were either really young or not even alive yet, that Empire Strikes Back was hugely controversial.
Yep. Because Star Wars fans are Star Wars fans. They
exactly. And one insight that I heard on a review once about the prequels. There are a lot of people, especially today, who look back on the prequels and say, those were really good. Like, that is what Star Wars is supposed to be, the prequels. And those of us who saw the prequels in the theaters as young adults were like, wait, what? Like, how do you look back on these movies and go, no, these were really good. Like, this was peak Star Wars.
Yeah.
And the reason is it's that nostalgia thing. Yeah. Like, that's the Star Wars if that's the Star Wars you grow up with, that's what Star Wars is to you.
Yeah, I mean,
and everything else is kind of grandfathered in, right? Like, stuff that came before.
Say as they enter into those debates, by the way, I was this age when I experienced this, because that's the most salient fact. Like, oh, by the way, I was 9. Yep, that's why you love it. And that's okay. That's great. That's
totally fine. That's what it's for, right? Yeah. Star Wars is supposed to be for everybody.
Yeah.
And but you're able to connect with it at any age.
Middle-aged white guy going, This isn't the Star Wars of my childhood. Well, you don't even, you're not a child anyway. You are looking, back and trying to remember how you felt. And you weren't analyzing those things critically when you were 9. You were going, this is lightsabers and big explosions, and I love it, and we're always going to have that. I mean, I can get really worked up about how much I hate the prequels. And then I have to go, oh yeah, because I was the wrong age. Like, if I'd been 9, I would have loved them, I think. But I did get to see Yoda fight, which I was pretty excited about.
And I mean, they have some great moments.
Yeah.
The plot doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's a Star Wars tradition, right?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, the things we critique about the ones we don't like are also true of the ones we do like. I can't believe that they retconned in this one. Have you seen the original trilogy? They
does the caper at the beginning of Return of the Jedi make any logical sense?
Right.
Would anyone who makes anything like a plan come up with that plan?
Right.
No.
And so then I can't believe they had a plan to go to, this gambling planet. That doesn't make any sense. It wasn't relevant to the plot. Have you seen Return of the Jedi? Like,
right.
That's, par for the course. I can't believe they retconned that this person was related to somebody and we didn't know they were related to them. Yeah, that's in the original too. Like, that's the way Star Wars works.
It's interesting. We're talking about the generations of Star Wars fans. So on the Dungeon Scrawlers, we recently did this 4-session actual play of a Star Wars game called Quadrilateral. It's run not by me. I wasn't the GM. It was run by Jason Collins, who is a writer and comic book person and very old friend of mine. We actually shared a TOC many years ago in one of the Realms anthologies. And he is like us, kind of middle-aged white guy, saw the original Star Wars movies either in the theaters or very early after they had initially come out. And his version of Star Wars gaming is the West End Games D6 version. So that is the system that he played on this channel, but on this game. But the 4 primary players who were in this game, they're all young people. They're like 20, early 20s, maybe late 20s. Very, very young millennials or Zoomers, and they come with a different perspectives and different views on what Star Wars is to them and to what Jason has. And so just watching that all work together and flow together is a really rewarding and interesting experience. A lot of his stuff for this particular adventure comes from Andor. And Andor is a piece of Star Wars media that a lot of people can agree on is pretty good.
Yeah, it's high quality.
Like it has a little bit of Star Wars silliness, right? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
There's Star Wars silliness in every Star Wars.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But not a lot. It's generally pretty serious, and it has a lot of important things to say.
Well, and I'll bet the critique of it by folks who don't like it is that it's too serious. Like it's pretty heavy.
Yeah. Yeah, it takes itself pretty seriously, and it's tackling some really heavy themes.
Yeah, I mean, I love it, but I'm as an adult, and I'm going, I don't know that a kid would enjoy Andor. Like, it's pretty heavy and slow at times.
There isn't necessarily a lot there for a kid who is into space explosions, pew pew pew, that kind of Star Wars fandom, which is great. I mean, again, Star Wars is for everyone. It's supposed to have things for everyone. The thing I find most remarkable about Andor is that Disney created it.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, hey, this series is pretty much against, your widespread capitalism and corporatization. But okay, sure.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, it shows that Disney is willing to go, we'll try different paths and we'll see, and we'll slice up the audience and we'll find the thing that works for you. And that one really, and also they're listening to the talent, which is nice. They've had some really good writers on that one who were willing to say, let's do something a little more adult and somber. I mean, some of those.
I know it's the popular thing to denigrate Disney and think of them as the evil corporate overlords, and they are.
And they are. It's fair.
Sure. But like, it's not all bad. That's what I'm saying. Like there's some good stuff there, and they're making some good moves and good evolution, and I hope I see it continue.
Well, it's like criticizing capitalism itself. Like you run into the, I don't like all the injustices of capitalism, but capitalism has produced some nice stuff. Capitalism's good with stuff.
Yeah.
It's not always great.
No ethical consumption under capitalism.
Yeah.
And we can always rail against our system on our phones that
exactly as I say
are representative of that system.
Capitalism is terrible as I drink my Mountain Dew
and we could go on and on about this. It is easier to imagine the end of the world than the end of capitalism.
Yeah.
And there are better systems and things we could do to edge ourselves away from it. But I don't necessarily want to get into my leftist propaganda here on your show.
Yes. Oh no, I don't mind it a bit, but we should. So the point of the show is not to propagandize our leftist politics, although I enjoy that. But I want readers to get to know you. So one of the things I always ask folks is, if you yourself, not a D&D character you want to play, but if you yourself were a character in D&D, what would be your race and class? Kind of as a Rorschach of, who people are reading when they're reading your work.
So I actually have two answers to this. One of which I wrote down beforehand when I saw that you were going to ask this question, because like that Rorschach thing, it's just like first impulse answer, and then a second answer. And so I'll give you the first one first. If I were suddenly a D&D character, I would be a tiefling, not your like big horns, devil-looking tiefling, but like somewhat unsettling, somewhat sinister, pointed ears, a little too sharp teeth, maybe a little bit otherworldly, right? One of my good friends, Erin Evans, who I mentioned before, she is like the wicked aunt of tieflings in the Forgotten Realms. Like she is the expert on tieflings in the Forgotten Realms, and she would be, well, I don't want to put words in her mouth, but she would be giving my tiefling some side eye, is what I'm saying. Like as she sees it, tieflings, they have the horns and the devils, because that's part of the Brimstone Angel series, and which is all about how tieflings work and stuff. Highly recommended. Definitely go read it. You should have Erin on your show because she is awesome. Anyway, my tiefling is different. My tiefling is more of a second edition Planes of Chaos tiefling, right?
What do you think that says about who you are as a person?
I think it has something to do with my interest in all things occult and a little bit dark and a little bit not shining good, but still having a good heart and still trying to do my best and being a major smartass most of the time. And then in terms of class, I would be my favorite, which is a rogue paladin. So,
and that is doing good, but also, a little bit mischievous,
Right. Also, mechanically, it's great. Rogues help out the paladin's lack of mobility, which is largely the main issue with paladins. Like having that cunning action makes a huge difference to a paladin. And there's no reason you can't play a paladin with light or medium armor. You don't have to be a shining knight in shining armor. You can be a sneaky assassin paladin.
Yeah.
And combining sneak attack and smite can work wonders.
Yeah, but I love that in the system, these choices have consequences. If you're not wearing that heavy armor, there may be times you wish you were wearing heavy armor, and there will be times when you are wearing the heavy armor and you are wishing you had light armor. So it rewards this very real world phenomena of choices have consequences.
That's right. That's right.
Okay, so you are that character. You're the tiefling rogue paladin, and you are ambushed in the woods by 3 level 1 goblins.
Excellent.
The easiest. What do you do?
Okay, so the first thing is that I probably have a high charisma, because paladins need a high charisma. So I'm going to try and intimidate them to run away. If that doesn't work, however, I am going to attack suddenly while I'm in the middle of this speech. Do a sneak attack and a smite to put down one of the goblins as hard as I possibly can. And that should do the trick of scaring them away.
So first attempt to take care of it without killing anyone, then attempt to take care of it, killing the fewest possible.
Correct. Exactly.
Yes, I appreciate that.
Well, I suppose I could be doing non-lethal damage. I'm not sure
Yeah,
if it lets you do
maybe it's
non-lethal
just
damage with a
very
smite and a
stunned.
sneak attack, but you know.
Very dramatically stunned. Yes.
All right. So my other answer to this set of questions, on the Dungeon Scrawlers, we have this campaign called Isekai Realms, which is exactly what it sounds like. We ourselves, like Erik de Bie, Rhiannon Held, other people in the game, get sucked into the Forgotten Realms as ourselves, and the only thing we really have going for us is our meta knowledge of the world. And so there's a certain amount of like pretending to know secrets or telling people secrets, which is the thing that you see in these kind of isekai anime shows, especially the dating based ones, the Otome game ones, where they're like, there's this character who's an obstacle in the game, but he has this dark secret. So I'll just go tell him the dark secret and then he'll be blackmailed and out of the way. Right. So it's that kind of feel. And in this game, I am currently a warrior, not even a fighter, just a warrior, aspiring to be a paladin, because we're using second edition rules, because that's what the DM knows. And we started the game with this strange sigil, like tattooed on our chests, and it has magical powers. You can draw upon the mark in order to do something in the world. And on a dare, very early in the game, like I think session 2 or something, one of them said, well, do you think you can summon Vindicator with your mark? Vindicator being a paladin knight sword in my Shadowbane series. Like it's the main weapon that my character has. And this is like 100 years before those take place, but the sword still exists. It's theoretically the sword of the god Helm, in fact. And I'm like, why not? Let's give it a shot. And the DM looks at me, he's like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, let's do it. And he's like, okay, roll. And I rolled a 1, I think. I think I rolled a 1. And the thing is, when you're doing skill checks in second edition, you want to roll low because you want to roll under your ability that you're rolling.
Oh,
like that's how those worked. And or at least those are the rules that he's playing with. The second edition was a little flexible.
1 is a critical success.
Correct.
Oh, okay.
So sure enough, I summoned this, burning holy sword with silvery fire, and my mark goes away. Like I burned it all out to get this +3 holy smiting sword. And so now I myself am running around the realms with this holy sword that I can summon or make dissipate when I want to. And everyone else still has their marks and still gives them magical powers. And it seems, since I'm the DM on many of the Dungeon Scrawlers things, that I would be the logical leader, but that's not the case. Like I should not be the leader. I tend to make impulsive decisions in the game, and they're not always for the best. Anyway, I don't want to spoil it further. Isekai Realms is really fun, and you should definitely check it out.
That is really cool. And what do you think how does that, the way that character has kind of manifested, though that character is you, what does that tell potential readers about you? Because I think that's an interesting, the aspiring paladin with the way OP sword, what does that tell? How would a reader see that in your work?
Well, there's the thing that drives my character in the Isekai Realms game is responsibility. Because I feel like the meta story is that I talked this DM into running this for the Dungeon Scrawlers. So it's my fault that we're in this situation.
You made the point.
I see it as my responsibility to get everyone out who wants to go home. Not everyone wants to go home. But those of us who do, I see it as my responsibility to make that happen. And as we go, we just acquire more and more things that we are responsible for. And so I am going through basically emulating this with great power comes great responsibility thing. which is one of the key moral ethical tenets of most of my work.
Yeah.
Because it's something I strongly believe.
Yeah.
You know, I'm a geek. Is it a surprise that some of my philosophy is based on Spider-Man? No.
Yeah. That is our geek catechism.
Yeah. You know, if you have the power and privilege to help people, you have an obligation to do so.
Yeah.
That's just how morality works.
Yeah.
You know, it can manifest in things as small as I'm a big tall person, a big tall guy. I will walk people to their car.
Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
or it could be I make a decent living with my day job. I give money to charity, or it could be I have the power to vote. I vote for the non-fascist.
Yes.
And
the
all these things
inverse
are
is how
important.
we understand villainy and we're trained to by our Marvel comics, right? The person
Right.
who has an incredible amount of power and doesn't use it to help others, uses it to harm others, is the villain. And boy, do we see that in our world. Like, that is how I identify villains. It's not, oh, this person, who is downtrodden and abused made a bad choice. It's this person who had so much power, so much ability to help, instead chose to cause harm. That's the supervillain,
Yeah, and that's a pretty clear-cut way of looking at what a villain is. The problem, and this is the caveat, is that we get into the sense of villains are sometimes coded in comics and in movies as people who want to change the system.
Yeah.
Like, that's primarily what they want to do, is that they want to disrupt capitalism.
It's the innate conservatism of the kind of villain, is they want to, these are the people who want to cause change, and good people want to preserve the status quo.
Poison Ivy wants to thwart the corporate lobbyists that are destroying the rainforest, and she's a villain. Right, because she's an eco-terrorist, or because she poisons people with her kisses or something. But in real life, like, the people that she's opposing, they are the bad guys.
Yeah.
She's just going about doing things in a dark, evil sort of way. Sometimes.
Yeah. No, I tell my students, Shakespeare is inherently conservative. The play resolves when the status quo has been reestablished, or
yes.
If it is tragic, it's tragic because the status quo couldn't be reestablished. And that we should be really critical as we're reading it and recognize this was somebody who was selling tickets and needed to make sure that the powers that be were happy, and was reinforcing the idea that however things are is the way they ought to be. And that is problematic in and of itself. So,
yeah. I mean, we talk about conserving things under conservatism. What is conservatism conserving?
Yeah.
It's conserving power and privilege and prestige
and hierarchy.
And yeah, it was originally coming out like the founding thinkers of conservatism, Burke, de Maistre, people like that, were coming up with these concepts around the time of the French Revolution, when people were upsetting the established hierarchy, and they were looking for ways to justify keeping that hierarchy in place, ways that did not involve the divine right of kings. So instead, they went with money mostly.
Yeah. And I value the input of true conservatives in saying, slow down, let's think about this. I think we need those people. We need people who will say, let's slow down and be thoughtful. That is not what modern conservatism has become, where it is, dogmatic about the hierarchy that I was raised with. We just need to return to that, and then everything will be great. Like, that's not the social value that conservatism really could have. Conservatism should lose, and progressivism should lose, in that it should be slowed so that we are thoughtful about the changes that we make. And that would be a really healthy tension and compromise. But we are not.
We should make progress.
Yeah,
we should make progress logically and sustainably, so that we don't end up slipping back into a right-wing counter. And as you brought this up, it's important to have that kind of restraining force, someone to say, okay, let's make sure we can pay for this.
Yeah.
Right. That doesn't have to be the GOP, though.
No,
that doesn't have
no.
to be conservatives. That can be Democrats,
A moderate,
who are
yeah,
a
a
center-right
moderate
party.
Democrat. Yep, they really are a center-right party, and yeah, that is, somebody
Anyway,
saying,
I'm not a
slow down
Democrat.
and
I
do
just
that
want to make that
thoughtfully.
clear.
Yeah, I am pretty far to the left on the for the Dems, but I value the folks who are shifting the Overton window to the left, because the Democratic Party is a center-right party, and at the
Or at
same
least
time,
trying to pull the Overton window
yeah,
back so that it doesn't keep going to the right, which
right,
it
right.
has for decades.
Well, and it's because the alternatives are so abominable that we're willing to go, okay, well, I'll take center right over, authoritarianism, and so when not presented with options that we can tolerate, we end up getting the lesser intolerable.
Right. And when you are placed in a situation where your choices are profound evil and like,
yeah.
you are morally obligated to choose the option.
Hold your nose, be a grown-up. Like, it's hard. Like, I've got a lot of my friends are former students. They're in their 20s now, and they're going, I am so sick of being forced to make these choices I don't like. And I'm like, yeah, I know, it sucks.
Yeah,
we're grown-ups. We have, if you have the privilege to say, I get to decide, use that privilege to not cause this extreme harm, and then build a farm team and create a third option. I think that's lovely, but please don't say, well, I would face the least consequences from a burn it down, so let's burn it down. Like, that is selfish, but that's right. Hard for folks to and I would not have wanted to hear that from an old me when I was in my 20s either.
Right. And building up that sustainable leftist party takes a lot of work, and it takes work from the ground up.
Yeah,
and
you don't start with a presidential election. You start with your local mayor's race and your city council and your local legislature, and that's hard. That kind of patience is also hard if you're 25, and you're going, this is going to take decades. Yeah, it takes decades to build a political party. This is not easy.
My fellow leftists and progressives often get frustrated with how I see things, because it is incrementalist, kind of.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's how progress gets made, and it's really frustrating, and I share everyone's frustration. I've been around too long to believe in this kind of like, maybe this time just miraculously everybody will vote for Bernie or somebody like Bernie. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. People are, I don't want to say selfish, I don't want to say self-centered, but a lot of people's view is narrow. It's limited to their life and the people around them, because it has to be, because people are working hard to survive, to make money, and to, I could go on about this. Again, leftist propagandizing, but the point is, try and be patient with people. It's not always easy, but it is important.
And it's okay to validate that frustration. Like, I understand why folks on the left are very frustrated. I share your frustration. But I'll say to folks sometimes, which would you rather have? Would you rather get things done or be right? Because sometimes you can be right to no effect, or worse, in a way that causes harm. So sometimes you got to go, oh, I'm going to do this thing that I'm not super comfortable with because it makes progress. And that is a really hard thing to do. And I want to validate that is hard and compromising, it feels gross.
One of humanity's primary weaknesses as a species is our ability to see into the future and predict the consequences of our actions. Long-term thinking is not really our thing, especially, when we're beaten down under the crushing boot of capitalism.
Yeah.
And racism and other bigotries, which all serve that same hydra of oppression.
Yeah. And it is, I know this sounds ageist, but it's also biological. Like, it is a function of age that the younger we are, the more impulsive we are. An infant must be fed right now, and a teenager can think about Friday night. And, and an old person goes, am I going to go out today? Let me think about it for 3 days. No, I don't think I will. And so there is a healthy place in between to say we need to think this through and make these choices. And that's hard, regardless of your age.
It is very, very difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to go to our commercial.
I want to say one more thing.
Oh, go for it.
On this topic, and then we'll go to the commercial break. So another nerd topic, The Witcher, right? I'm a big fan of the books. I also watched the show. The show is very different from the books, but it's still entertaining to me. I don't know. It's silly. It's dumb. It's fine.
Some of the acting is good and some is so terrible. And it's like, are we watching the same show? Are you on the same
right.
set?
It's fine. But one of the topics that people constantly bring up is this thing that Geralt says in the first episode or the first story, if you read the books, which is, evil is evil. And if I have to choose between a greater evil or a lesser evil, I prefer not to choose at all. Right. And some people take that as like the thesis statement of the Witcher series. Like, it is better to be an uninvolved centrist who is just, morally right and doesn't choose, like doesn't play that game. But the thing is, if you watch that episode or you read that story, that goes really poorly for Geralt.
That is his central character flaw, is that he is so disengaged. That's what he needs to overcome over the course of the story. It's exactly. When you're watching this text and somebody's saying, I really admire that about him, and you're like, you are not getting it.
No. And by not choosing, he supports the greater evil every time. That is what happens when you refuse to take sides or you refuse to make a choice. The greater evil always wins.
Yeah.
We saw that in 2016. We're seeing that in further elections. Although at this point, it does seem that, the tide is slightly turning against the regressive anti-democratic powers in America. And I take a little bit of hope in that, people of our age range are less conservative than our parents used to be.
Yeah.
Like, that used to be the wisdom that as you age, you're going to become more conservative.
Yeah. Not
in many cases.
Yeah, so. In so many ways, I am more liberal than I was in my 20s when I was still going, oh, here's all this baggage that I refuse to unpack, and going through. I mean, one of the things is we're willing to go to therapy. We're willing to
such a big difference.
I've got this stuff that I need to work through, but yeah, that is.
Viewers, please go to therapy if you can. It's always a good thing. Even if you don't think you need it, it's still very helpful.
Yeah, and I understand that there are barriers and it is expensive and it is difficult.
Absolutely.
If you can get in therapy, go to therapy before it's a crisis. Don't wait until you must go to therapy. Go to therapy preventatively. It's really wonderful if you have the opportunity. So
definitely. All right.
Highly recommend. Okay, so we're going to go to our ad break. But when we come back from our ad break, I'm going to ask you what you've been daydreaming about lately.
Hi, I'm Karen Eisenbray, and I wear a lot of hats. Wife, mother, church lady, writer, editor, punk rock drummer. I gave all my hats to Barbara, the main character of the Gospel According to St. Rage, and Barbara and the Rage Brigade. Barbara isn't your typical high school junior. She's been invisible since the 3rd grade. But when a magic hat brings her back into the light, Barbara is ready to take on the world. First priority? Start an all-girl garage band. Miraculous superpowers were never in her plan. But sometimes you get what you need. Bullies and school shooters don't stand a chance. Truth, justice, rock and roll.
So, Eric, what have you been daydreaming about lately?
Let's see. Okay, so over the last few years, during the pandemic, slightly before the pandemic, since 2016, essentially, I would frequently have dreams and recurring thoughts about a death note falling from the sky. So for those who have not,
this is the manga, right? This is the show.
It's the manga and the
so tell folks about that, because I had to look this up. I did not know this manga, but this is an interesting story.
So Death Note, and as the anime, okay, it's anime has a reputation for doing really edgy things and being really edgy. Well, Death Note is very, very edgy. So if you start watching it and it doesn't work for you, that's totally fine. But the basic concept is this young man, teenager, I think he's in high school, he's 16 or 17. He gets a notebook which is dropped by a god of death. And whenever you write someone's name in the notebook, they will die within about a minute. And there are other rules, like you can write down someone's name and the manner of their death, and then that will happen. And so you can also put in time delays and say, like, this person dies on such and such date at this time, etc. And he gets this book, and he's a generally pretty good aligned, I want to say more lawful aligned sort of person than a good aligned person. And his good goes away pretty quickly. He gets this power and he says, you know what? I'm going to make the world better. I'm going to get rid of murderers. I'm just going to get rid of them. And he watches the news for names of murderers and he writes down their names and they just die in prison or they die during a police standoff. And, it starts like he's saving people who are taken hostage by these criminals. The criminal just dies, ends the hostage standoff. In the modern day, I think it came out in the 90s, maybe the early 2000s. But in the modern day, he would be like writing down names of terrorists and they would just perish, right? And to some extent, you think, all right, that's maybe not so bad. You're taking out people who are going to take out more people. From a utilitarian standpoint, that does make sense. But as it goes along and he uses this evil power more, he starts expanding and he starts growing to greater levels of self-importance and narcissistic God complex. He's taking out all criminals, regardless of what they did. If he's taking out just accused criminals, then he starts taking out political rivals and people who are causing harm in other places, and then he's taking out people who criticize his public persona, that kind of thing. So I, having watched this and having been an edgy teen at one point in my life, said, if I had this book, would I use it? And my answer was definitely yes. Now, that's not good of me. I try to be neutral good. That's my aspirational alignment. And that would be definitely contradicting that. But would I use that power to solve a few problems and try and protect a lot of people who stand to be really harmed? Yeah, definitely I would. Would it destroy me as a person? Yeah, it definitely would. Like, that power would corrupt me and I would become evil. Definitely. And I would make the world a worse place in the long run. Well, would I use it? Yeah, because I'm weak. I'm a human being. We all have those impulses and those dark, intrusive thoughts. And then 2020 happened and Trump did not get reelected, and I felt better.
Yeah.
Not all the way better, obviously. Still lots of problems, lots of difficulties, but there was some ray of hope.
Yeah.
Because it was looking really bleak there for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm still very scared. I'm very nervous about what is coming. This last week we had a couple of elections internationally, and what happened in Austria is part of a larger pattern. It is frightening, and so I feel that nervousness about can we hold on to this hope, and what can I do? I think a lot of us are in that place where these forces seem so large, and yet the impacts can be very close to home, and so how do you do something about it? But and yet recognizing, if I had the power to magically solve it, I am not the person who would magically solve it, because the problem then would be me. Like, I am not perfect either,
It harkens back to that thing I was saying earlier about foresight and long-term thinking. Because we see a solution, we see a nail standing up from a board, and we have a hammer, and obviously we're going to use the hammer to hammer down the nail.
Right.
But then you start to think about, well, where did that nail go? Like, what's on the other side of that board? Right.
Well,
That's my very simple
got the
analogy.
foresight to say, if I had that book, I would use it and ultimately make the world a worse place. See, the foresight is, and yet we can know the good and not do the good. Like, if I suddenly had the power, even knowing this will start off fine and it will get to a really dangerous place, how do I stop myself? I mean, I think that's a tension that really can inform our work in a really positive way. How do we have characters who are sympathetic because we understand that they are flawed and fallen, and we are too, as the writers, entering into that world, and all of our readers are too.
Exactly. I mean, whether you're a GM or a writer, you got to be able to present villains who are compelling and interesting. Sometimes they're villains who have very understandable motivations. We talked earlier about villains wanting to change the system for the better. Poison Ivy wants to save the world. She doesn't necessarily want to kill humans, although she doesn't mind killing humans. Humans, depending on who's writing her, depending on what era we're talking about, like, she might want to just destroy all humans because they're a threat to the natural world. And is she wrong? Not really. I mean, we are.
What is better? Like, that is an interesting question. I think the best villains have a motivation where we can say, I can kind of see where they're coming from. Maybe I disagree with their methods, but the better they want is a better I can believe in. And I just disagree with how they're going about it.
I mean, if you look at, say, Killmonger from the Black Panther movie, like, his motivation, his background, his ideology, philosophy was entirely understandable.
Yeah.
And what he was attempting to do, which is liberate oppressed people all around the world, I mean, that's great. Like who wouldn't want to do that? Well, the forces of conservatism don't want that to happen.
Right.
So what do we got to do? A third of the way into the movie, we got to make sure that everyone knows this guy's the bad guy.
Right.
So we're going to have him shoot some people for really no reason. Yeah. And then you're going to know, oh, he's the bad guy. This is like the thing that happened with the villains in Captain America and the Winter Soldier too. Like, enough time went on and you started to go, maybe they have a point. Oh, they just burned down a building with people inside. Oh, yeah, bad guys. Okay.
But it's the means, right? I don't, I can identify with their objectives. Oh, but I didn't like what they just did to get there, and
right. So that is, of course,
shorthand. Like, let's show the most extreme thing they did,
Yeah, that is, of course, a writing device that we utilize in telling a narrative. And sometimes it's really heavy-handed, and sometimes it's a bit more subtle.
My most recent, the series that I'm writing right now, the main characters, a couple of main characters, a vampire and a werewolf, and they're these really likable characters. Fans love my vampire and my werewolf, and I have to remind the reader they do eat people. Like, they're not, but they'll actually, there's a scene where they do some feeding, and then a lot of the story goes on, and then they are hungry. They have to eat again. And I had the editors go, oh yeah, that was really disturbing because I came to like this character, but they do kill people. Muddying that, what is villainy, we can all understand the motivation of, I'm hungry, I need to eat.
Right.
So tell folks about what is going on with you in terms of your writing life right now. What should they be checking out? Because this is exciting. Our timing is very good.
Okay, so yes, last week, time of recording, I published a novel with my co-writer Amanda Cherry, who I believe you've had on the show before.
Last week's show, yes.
Yeah, so she recommended me, and Amanda's great. Called Femmes Fatale 2: Bad Intentions, which is a sequel to the original Femmes Fatale book, which came out last year about this time. And here, I'll just pop up the background of the book. It's about these two women who are around 40-ish and have had a history with superheroing or supervillainy, as the case may be. And they end up wildly attracted to each other, and then they're trying to put together some kind of relationship, although one of them definitely doesn't want to call it a relationship, so it's more of a situationship.
Yeah.
And they're dealing with secrets and trying to be honest and intimate and open with each other. The intimacy they're often very good at. The emotional intimacy, much more difficult. And of course, this is a major human challenge, right? How do you build those relationships? How do you really touch with somebody? How do you really connect with somebody? How do you trust somebody, especially when you're highly traumatized and surrounded by, terrible people opposing you at every turn, right? And that's what this series is about. Next month, at time of recording, January 2024, I'm going to put out 2 novels that are prequel novels to my overall Justice Vengeance series, which features this Lady Vengeance as the main character of that series. Those particular novels are prequels when she was an edgy teen in the 90s. They're called Girl Vengeance rather than Lady Vengeance because that was her name at the time. And they are called Pretty Hate Machine and The Downward Spiral, respectively. There might be a little bit of a theme.
Yeah, I right away. Yep, okay. That was also me in, 1996 or whatever. Yes.
Yep. They take place in 1996 Chicago, I believe.
Yep. Yeah, we were listening to our Nine Inch Nails. Excellent. So tell folks about how Amanda mentioned this, but folks who didn't catch last week's episode, the way these the Femmes Fatales books came about is really interesting. Because these started, this is wild. Tell everybody about this.
Okay, so Amanda and I tell the story somewhat differently because we had very different perspectives on each other. She was apparently incredibly intimidated by me because her first exposure to me was reading one of the novels that I wrote, Eye for an Eye, which is another prequel story that takes place in 2015, I think, something like that, which features Lady Vengeance.
Okay.
Yeah. As a grown-up, she hasn't really returned to superheroing yet, but she still has her powers and she still makes terrible mistakes. Anyway, it's fine.
Yeah.
And so Amanda was like real nervous because we were having a story summit for the Cobalt City universe, which is the superhero universe where all these characters exist or crossover. And she ended up sitting next to me, and I'm pretty tall and she is not. And so she was like, the whole time, which I was completely oblivious to. I was like, well, she seems nice and has good ideas. And that summit,
entertaining. Like she's a ton of fun.
Absolutely. That summit was to discuss an anthology where we were going to do it was a team up anthology where each of us would pick one of our favorite characters, and another author would work with us to write a team up story with those 2 characters. And Amanda had this character, Ruby Killingsworth, which is the most evil CEO name you could possibly come up with. And I had Lady Vengeance, and Amanda had really liked Eye for an Eye, and I really liked what she was writing that became Rights and Desires with Ruby and Stardust.
Just a short story at the time, right? It was,
well, we were planning. Yes. When we were talking about this anthology, we were just going to write a short story where Lady Vengeance and Ruby meet.
Yeah.
And it was going to be one of those things where they'd either start fighting or fall madly into bed with each other. And we looked at each other and we're like, well, both of those things could happen. And so sure enough, we started writing the story, and both Amanda and I are very prolific in terms of like putting together words and just writing the story. And our story was the only one that survived from that original conversation. Like everyone else just got busy and they did other things, moved on to different things. But Amanda and I wrote our story, and we wrote up to the 2,000, 3,000 word planned thing. And we're like, this is really good. We should write more. And so we wrote more. and more and more. And then over the course of a couple of years, the pandemic happened, and it became our kind of like one of our pandemic relief projects to just write, when we feel like it, because it's really fun and we like the characters, we like the story. Amanda describes it as all vibes, no plot. I forced us to put a plot into it. I did that with the second book as well.
Yes, readers are like, thank you. Plot is nice too.
And finally, we turned over the first draft to our editor and said, do you think there's a book in this? And she said, well, there's actually 2 books in this. One book that is the actual book, and then the other book, which is the epilogue, which is 30,000 words long, and is really just like the next year of them vibing. And we're like, you're right. So now we're writing the second book, came out last week.
Yeah.
There is a third book also, which is in the planning, and that one is called Femme Fatale 3, Bad Romance.
And what's the timeline on that one? Because my understanding is this is really compressed, right? Do we have a sense of that when that one's coming out?
So the first Femmes came out last year around this time. Second Femmes came out this year around this time. Third Femmes is probably not going to come out next year around this time, because chronologically, like a lot of things happen in that universe before the third Femmes book.
Okay, so you've given yourself a little flexibility there.
Right. If we brought it out next year, it would be a little confusing and potentially spoilery for a bunch of other books that haven't been published yet.
Yeah.
Speaking of my Justice Vengeance series, which starts with Libations for the Dead, is what the first one is called. This young unknown scion of superheroes finds out that his father is basically the Superman of that world, and he's long since dead. He never met him, doesn't have the opportunity to meet him, but he does have a chance encounter with Lady Vengeance, who was on that same superhero team, and can theoretically tell him about his father, right? And they get caught up in superheroics, and she gets kind of pulled out of retirement, and it's great. And that's the Justice Vengeance series. Links down below. Libations for the Dead is out. I ran a Kickstarter for it earlier this year, successfully funded. I published that book in April, May, something like that. Anyway, the second book, which is called Public Enemy, named after the band, comes out middle of next year.
Oh, that's exciting. So
it's
yeah,
May
you
or
really
June.
do have like 3 books coming out within a year.
At least 3 books coming out next year.
That's a lot.
I think
folks out there might not know that's a lot.
there might be more. Who knows? But Public Enemy, and the first Femme Fatale book take place around the same time. Actually, Lady Vengeance is in Seattle for a chapter of Public Enemy, and then immediately leaves to go back east to do stuff in Femme Fatale. And then she comes back, and the other characters have been doing stuff, and they're like, and she's like, did you even notice I was gone? And they're like, and she says, I was possessed by a demon. And they're like, and she's like, never mind, let's just get on with it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Nice. So you get, and that's in the text of Femme Fatale, where the nice.
Right.
There's another whole story you can go find about her time away. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that is incredibly exciting. Like so much in a year. That's I hope you are doing launch parties. I hope you are celebrating, because writers do not celebrate enough, and that's
it's true. We do need to acknowledge our accomplishments.
Yeah, I mean, I tell writers, like, if you were in any other field, it'd be, it's Susie and shipping and receiving's birthday, there's a cake in the break room, right? But writers, we don't have that. And so we need to celebrate these achievements. So yeah, I hope you have some big parties this year for yourself, because that's a big deal. Okay, so one of the other things we do is each week I post a poll question for the universe. Try and remember to post a poll question for the universe. So what would be your question for everyone?
Okay, so I gave this some thought, and this is going to be a fantasy question. There's a lot of talk about magic systems and how you do magic in fantasy. And lots of authors do it in very different ways. So my question would be, do you prefer a clear and precise magic system, or do you prefer magic to be weird and unpredictable?
Yeah. The Lord of the Rings magic that, it's this amorphous, some people have it, like, but it doesn't follow clear rules or have clear consequences to the magic wielder. Yeah, wild
Lord of the Rings magic, the Game of Thrones magic, where magic is dangerous and strange and you're not sure what's going to happen.
Yeah. Versus systems that, and I think, that is a really interesting question for fantasy writers and fantasy readers, like, which I think I might fall into the two camps depending on whether I'm doing the reading or the writing. I love so many stories that have that wild magic, but as a writer, I want to understand the system a little more. So, and some readers want a system that makes more sense. So yeah, that's an interesting question. I'll be interested to see where people fall on that one.
As I get older and as I write more, I find myself more drawn to the strange and unpredictable magic. It's partly because I grew up with the Advancey and D&D magic, and now that I'm just kind of evolving with my writing style and my gaming style, I like weird, visceral, dangerous magic. You may have noticed my background, which I use this when I run my Delta Green games, which is, for those of you who don't know, it's like X-Files if the X-Files were investigating Cthulhu.
I was gonna say so the folks listening can't see this, but you've got this series of spirals that to me look like tentacular. Is that a word? Is that an adjective? It looks like a Cthulhu-esque kind of tentacle behind you. It is very cool, and then spiraling in. So that, and I have been playing with that Cthulhu kind of eldritch monsters that are kaiju kind of, but can potentially end the world and are powerful in ways that do not follow our laws of physics, and that is fun to write. But I have worried about, is the reader going to go, this character is so overpowered and the defeat of them feels like a MacGuffin. So figuring out how to do that in a way that feels right to the reader and is foreshadowed enough and feels plausible, and at the same time the monster does feel wild and unpredictable is a real trick. It's an interesting balance. But I'm getting into the writing process.
Lovecraftian magic and cosmic fantasy really lean into that. Magic being strange and unpredictable, and the chances of humans successfully pulling off magical effects are not great.
And I in terms of my worldview, I like that. Like, let's break down this illusion that we understand everything that's going on around us and everything is within our control. Like, I like this idea, but how do you capture that on the page in a constrained system of literally it's a system, language, and so that is a fun thing to play with. How do you get at the ineffable with words?
Right. I was also going to recommend for anyone who is like really interested in this like ineffable magic and maybe heard what I said about Delta Green and is really interested. There's a series of books called The Laundry Files by Charles Stross, which is just a really good encapsulation. It's like, I don't know if Delta Green or had any influence on his writing. Like, these books came out in the early 2000s. 2004 is the first one. But like, he just took stuff from their head and put it into his books. And whether that happened organically or mystically, I don't know. But it's a great little feel and aesthetic. I recommend those books. They're pretty good. It's a little bit like James Bond, except he's a computer nerd and he's investigating weird cosmic horror.
Which would be outside of the wheelhouse of somebody who likes computer systems. So that tension, I think, I will absolutely check that out. That gets at that tension that I'm trying to kind of explore too. So
it might be very helpful for what you're trying to capture. The magic and weird math of the cosmic is is part of the computerizing systems that he works on. They recruit agents for the Laundry. That's the British agency that investigates Cthulhu stuff, based on people who accidentally come close to casting an evil spell, usually through programming and
So it's
calculating
not this
mathematic
person
theorems.
is intentionally doing the occult. This person, got too close on accident with a keystroke error.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the agents from the Laundry will show up and they'll either kill the person or recruit them, essentially. So yeah, it's really interesting. Cool. Highly recommend it. And it has a certain amount of that dry British like sarcasm and wit that it's fun.
Yeah, we'll put links for folks who want to check that out, but I certainly want to check that out. So
totally.
What is something that you've not read that you're looking forward to?
Let's see. So I am hopelessly behind on my reading. And, between my day job and all my writing and Baldur's Gate 3. Yeah. If you'd asked me that yesterday, there's this book called The Unspoken Name by A.K. Larkwood. It's pretty popular. It's a fantasy about this young woman who is connected to an ineffable god of some kind, and I don't want to spoil it, but I had been meaning to read that, and I actually started reading it yesterday. So I can't really say that that's the one I'm looking forward to. I am doing
but it's been good so far.
Oh, it's fantastic. Okay, I am doing a reread of The Black Company by Glenn Cook.
I don't know that one.
Oh my God, it's classic anti-hero fantasy from the late 80s, early 90s. Glenn Cook's writing was very much ahead of its time. It was doing the kind of thing that Martin was doing.
Yeah.
Before Martin was doing it. The Black Company is this band of, amoral mercenaries. Well, amoral might be a hard thing to say about them, but they're like cruel, pragmatic, practical, and they take any job, no matter how dirty, as long as they're getting paid for it, right? Yeah. Just it's a dark fantasy world, and most of the people are just terrible, terrible people.
It's Blood Meridian as a fantasy.
Yeah, there you go.
Yes,
it has that dark fantasy has this kind of noir legacy that really influences it, and you can see that in the early iterations. Like, I consider the Conan stories to be kind of part of the birth of this dark fantasy sense, and then it's just gone on from there into what we call grim dark. A friend of mine refers to that as grim dark crapsack. He's like, all right, I don't want to play D&D, and we're like, yeah, but we're playing in this homebrew setting. He's like, I don't know, homebrew setting, it's grim dark crapsack world. He's like, I'm in.
Yeah. Oh, so that is not a
no, that's his thing. He loves
likes grim dark crapsack. Yeah.
Well, he's also a former, Vampire the Masquerade sort of player. So yeah, like he likes the dark stuff.
Yeah.
And so do I. I mean, a lot of my stuff is dark fantasy, and my superheroes have a certain amount of darkness, and it creeps in.
Yeah. And I appreciate it both as a reader and a writer. Like, I like books where the person's not saying, I tell folks I like a little bit of hope at the end. Not too much, just a little bit of hope. Don't give me and then it was all miserable and bleak and the but like maybe okay, that's enough. Not too much. And then I'm like, I can buy into this. Fits with my experience of the world. I'm fighting for a little bit of hope.
Definitely. And yeah, that's more or less where I end on things. Like, a lot of my endings are kind of not necessarily ambiguous, but like theoric. Like, some good things happen. You get the sense that things might turn out better, but they haven't been all fixed.
Yep. If people tie up all the, every knot into a nice little bow, I'm going, this, you lost me. This is not the way the world works, so yeah, I like that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So where can readers find your work online?
Okay. So I do have a website, erikscottdebie.com, which is oft overlooked and rarely updated. Overlooked by me. Like, I frequently forget to update it. So, it does list all my works. I have a ericscottdebie.com/bibliography will give you a list of all my works, at least most of them. I think I still need to update it and add a couple of new things. I'm on Twitter, or X if you prefer.
Twitter.
Yeah, no. Again, Erik Scott de Bie. I mostly talk about politics and yell at right wingers, but like, that's a place to learn about my work and publications and things that I'm doing. Come and watch us on the Dungeon Scrawlers. I am often on shows on our Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Dungeon Scrawlers, link down below. Let's see. I do have a Facebook page because I am an old person.
Right. And it's where a lot of the readers are. We go where the readers are.
Yeah, basically. And I'm on Blue Sky as well, just under my own name everywhere. I am not in any way hiding.
Yeah. Yes, we can't afford to. We need to be where the readers are. So yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll post links to all those things in the show notes. And so I want to ask you, who else should I have on the show? What are some folks you would recommend getting, reaching out to?
Okay, well, I mentioned Erin Evans,
Yeah.
who is also on the Dungeon Scrawlers. She actually runs that Fearful Symmetry game that I was talking about.
Oh, okay.
And she's fantastic. Like, she's kind of a latecomer to tabletop games. She just started playing D&D when she took a job as an editor at Wizards.
Oh.
She was editing the Eberron books and also some of the Forgotten Realms books. So that's how we first met. She was an editor on one of my books.
Oh, cool.
And so she didn't start gaming until she was 20s, maybe 30. Yeah. But she is just a natural at it. I don't know how she does it. Like, she weaves the story threads together. Really, really recommend it. So she can tell you a lot about gaming and a lot about writing and a lot about editing and a bit about publishing. So yeah, she would be a very good person to talk to.
Yeah, she'd be a good person for the listeners of the show, and also for me to talk to privately about anybody who's got insights into publishing. Like, I am, the publishing world is so opaque, and there are all these things where I would find them out, after I'd been doing it for 5 years, and go, why did no one ever tell me that? Like, so that would be very helpful.
Other Dungeon Scrawlers, Rhiannon Held would be a great person to talk to. Yang Wang, who does a lot of our tech stuff, and Stephen Merlino, who is one of the people who thought up the Dungeon Scrawlers in the first place. Randy Henderson, another longtime writer. Emily Tang, although she's probably real busy because she just had her second child just fairly recently and works at Wizards currently, so she's got a lot going on. Yeah, I will happily talk to all of them and see if anyone's interested.
Oh, that'd be great.
We have a bunch of Cobalt City people. Nathan Crowder, who is the founder of the Cobalt City universe, or I should say one of the sort of founder people of the Cobalt City universe. It was based on a campaign that he ran 40 years ago, right?
Oh, cool.
And it's great. And Rosemary Jones, who wrote a bunch of Forgotten Realms stuff and is also Cobalt City person and is currently writing for Arkham Horror with Aconite out of the United Kingdom. She would be great to have on the show. Let's see. I think I wrote more people down too. Let's see. Oh, yeah. If possible, you should get my buddy Rob Schwalb on your show. So Rob is a longtime game designer. He worked on 4th edition. He worked on 5th edition. And then he became an independent game designer. He owns Schwalb Entertainment. He produced Shadow the Demon Lord and the Weird Wizard thing. Now I completely forget what it's called, but it got like $400,000 on Kickstarter this year.
Oh my gosh.
And like he's just doing it all himself out of his dark pit in Tennessee or wherever it is that he lives. And he is a great guy. I think you'd get along real well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those are the people who occur to me immediately.
Well, that would be cool because I my impulse is always, I'm going to novelists and poets because this is kind of the world I know. And I've been trying to, go, okay, there are these folks who are doing writing, game design is very much valid writing. Like, how do I find, and so reaching out to folks who are in other fields of writing, I think it would be fun too. So yeah, I'll certainly reach out to Rob as well. But yeah, thank you for all those wonderful names. I will reach out and try and connect with them.
Yeah, okay. And I'll send you the list, obviously.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so before we get to our send-off, some folks I need to thank. Thanks to the artist Max Oakland, who reached out and provided one of his songs for our intro song, the song I Prefer the Dusk. Let Max know you like it by following him on Twitter at Max Oakland with 3 Ds. And thanks to Helizna CCO for their song Kids for the ad break. If you're in a band and you'd like your song used on the show, I'd love to highlight a listener's work like Max's song, so email that to me. Also, visual art, if you've got, a cooler logo for the show or whatever, if you are an artist and you'd like to have your art featured on the show, I love to support folks wherever you are in your career. Thanks to Doug, the producer, for making this show sound good and taking the blame when it doesn't. Thank you so much, Doug. I cannot forget to mention Writers Not Writing is a production of Not a Pipe Publishing, so please go to notapipepublishing.com and check out the amazing books written by writers who didn't procrastinate too much. If you like this show, rate and review it wherever you found it, and please check out Erik's Justice Vengeance series, the first of which is Libations for the Dead. Tell a friend about it. That makes a huge difference. And then if you can give it that, click on that 5th star and say, this was a lot of fun. Your reviews don't have to be long to make a big difference. So let Erik know, let the world know that you enjoyed the Justice Vengeance series. And the show too, click on the little thumbs up button and write a little comment. And remember, I am, susceptible to psychic damage. So be gentle. Okay, so for our send-off, Erik and I want you to remember some things this week. Erik, what's your advice for everybody for this next week?
All right, so I didn't really talk about this earlier. I often talk about this, but here it is. So the key to writing, to be a successful writer, to be an ongoing writer, to keep going, is perseverance. Perseverance is more important than connections, being independently wealthy, knowing who to work with, before even being talented. It is being unable to stop.
Yeah.
You recognize the value of your work, recognize that your voice is important, and just keep going. Keep trying. However many times you get rejected by editors and publishers, because you will, and it's just the way the writing world works. Keep pushing, keep writing. Trust yourself, trust your voice, perseverance.
Yeah, I agree. Everything in the industry is designed to get in your way. And I recognize it is designed to get in some folks' way more than others. But yes, persevering, powering through, that is one of the keys. However, grindcore culture can have us work ourselves into misery. And so I also remind folks that a book without spaces would be gibberish, and our lives need spaces too. So don't ignore the spaces. And third, no matter how much you procrastinate, we're still proud of you.
If I take my time